Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. No matter what time you're watching this video, hopefully it's a good time. My name is CJ Curry. This is Rise or Fall. And in today's video, we're going to do a DFS breakdown for Saturday's NFL wildcard playoff games. We've got a total of 3 games on the slate, starting off with the Colts at Bills, followed by the Rams at Seahawks, and last but not least, the Bucks versus the Washington football team. So we're going to go through game by game, position by position, hopefully helping you identify some good plays to have a winning lineup come Saturday. So as you can see on the screen here, we've got the Rise or Fall NFL Study Hub already preloaded. I went ahead and went up to the game time filters, and this is a handy little tool because it allows you to go through and filter out the games that you want to see or filter out the games that you don't want to see. So in this particular case, I've got the Saturday games already lined up for us so that we can filter out all the Sunday stuff. And then you also have the ability to do that for positions as well. So you can look at just quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, defenses. It's set up really nicely for you to have very good success here in terms of creating the best lineup possible. And then if you look across the board here, you've got multiple columns that cover multiple fantasy sites. For today, we're going to be mostly talking about Draftkings and FanDuel. Those are obviously the 2 most popular DFS fantasy sites. So those are the ones we'll be sticking to as far as today's video. But all the information you could ever possibly want or need is available here if you scroll across horizontally. All right, so we're going to get this started by going over the first game, and that's 1:05 p.m., the Colts at Bills. And I want to talk about quarterbacks first because my favorite quarterback on this slate happens to play for the Buffalo Bills. And you might know him if you've been playing DFS this season. There's no way you don't know who Josh Allen is. Allen has been off the charts. He's having a career year. There was a lot of question marks about Josh Allen and his ability to be one of those, top 5 type of quarterbacks. But I think all of those concerns, all of those worries have been laid to rest. Allen's been on fire. He ended the season on fire against Miami, as we saw. Even though he didn't play a full 4 quarters, he still put up a really good fantasy game from the time that he did get out on the field. So we'll take a look at Josh Allen today. As you can see, his price over on Draftkings is $7,500 versus FanDuel $9,000 there. DVP, defense versus position. Kind of a middle-of-the-pack matchup for Josh Allen. We know the Colts have been a pretty good defense overall for the most part. This game, by far, is going to be Josh Allen's, probably one of his toughest matchups, I would say, that he's faced so far this season. But out of the other quarterbacks that we have on the board, he is my favorite. You got Tom Brady out there. He has a tough matchup potentially against a fearsome foursome of the Washington football team's defensive line, led by Chase Young, the rookie who has already called out Brady. Funny enough, I don't know if you want to rattle that cage, the cage of Tom Brady, the GOAT, but Chase Young is up for the challenge. But I don't like that matchup as much for Brady as I do Allen's matchup. I think Allen definitely has the higher upside out of any of the quarterbacks on the board. Russell Wilson, Seattle hasn't really allowed Russ to cook much this season, at least down the stretch, I should say. The last few games, Russ has had some down performances. The matchup against the Rams, not a very good one. Their secondary has done a pretty good job with keeping opposing quarterbacks and opposing receivers in check. So I don't like that matchup so much for Wilson. Allen, definitely going to be my favorite quarterback on the board for this weekend. So if we take a look here, you could see what his DK value is going to be. Not quite as high as maybe some of the other guys, but 29.5, that's 3x of his DraftKings price, plus 7 additional points tacked on top of that, and that's how you come up with that 29.5 figure. So he's projected to be the highest scoring quarterback on the board. I think he'll probably end up being the chalkiest quarterback on the board as well. So if we go ahead and head on over to DraftKings, we can drop Josh Allen in the lineup there. I like that. That's a good start. Obviously, with DFS, you like to go the stacking route, meaning you put multiple players from the same team together on the same lineup. So who better to stack Josh Allen with than his number one receiver, Stefon Diggs. Diggs right now is questionable, but if we open up the news, looks like he's dealing with a minor oblique injury. I don't expect this to keep Stefon Diggs out of the game for any reason. He should be good to go, and we've got two higher price guys here, but we've got a good start to what I think is going to be a very profitable roster for us. So we talked a little bit about quarterbacks. Some of the other guys, if you're looking to pay down, I don't mind John Wolford. Pending that he is the starter, you're going to have to pay attention to Jared Goff in that news right now. Sean McVay and the Rams have kind of kept the news about Jared Goff and his availability for Saturday's game close to the chest. We don't know exactly what's going on with Goff, if he's going to play or not. So that's something that as the week progresses and we get closer to Saturday, that you're going to definitely want to keep tabs on. And if Goff plays, obviously you don't play Wolford. But for right now, I do like Wolford as a pay down option on DraftKings and FanDuel. Other than that, I'm not really interested in Phillip Rivers. Not really interested in Alex Smith. So, the top guy is going to be Josh Allen for me, probably Tom Brady and Russell Wilson in second there. So let's head over to wide receiver. We kind of alluded to it already. Stefon Diggs is looking like a great piece to match up with Josh Allen. And I like that start for roster construction. Let's look at some of the other options on the board here. We've got Terry McLaurin, another guy who is just a target machine. We know Terry McLaurin sees double-digit targets regularly. He also regularly puts up 7 to 10 receptions. So he's not just getting the targets, he's making good on those targets and converting them into catches. So that's something that you want out of your wide receivers. You want to see a lot of targets. The more volume, the better. Wide receivers can be a little bit tricky, but targets are one of those things that are typically a telltale sign of a receiver's potential for having a good fantasy performance for your team. So looking down the list here, Robert Woods, there is some news on Cooper Kupp. COVID-19, I believe, is putting his availability in question. So that's something to definitely be on the lookout for on Cooper Kupp. If he were to miss, Robert Woods would definitely, I would assume, see a uptick in targets and uptick in overall production. DK Metcalf, he has a tough matchup. Most likely we'll see Jalen Ramsey once again. His last 3 games have been kind of tough. We can go over to DraftKings and take a look at his recent game logs. 5.1 fantasy points, 11.9 fantasy points, and 9.3. So not only is Russ not cooking, but when Russ doesn't cook, DK Metcalf doesn't eat. So he's going to have another tough matchup. As you can see, his last meeting with the Rams, he was targeted 8 times. He hauled in 6 of those targets. He had 59 yards, no touchdowns. In fact, he hasn't scored in his last 3 games. So there's some cause for concern in this matchup. There's some cause for concern in the overall health and well-being of the Seattle Seahawks passing attack. Something to keep in mind when rostering Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf this week. Moving on down the board here, we've got Tyler Lockett. That's DK Metcalf's other half there in the Seattle Seahawks passing game. Tyler Lockett, he's been somewhat up or down too, really boom or bust. He had one monster game earlier this season, but he struggled for the most part overall. Last game, he did do really well. 14 targets, 12 receptions, Turn those into 90 yards and 2 touchdowns for a total of 33 fantasy points. So you love to see that. His last game against the Rams, however, was only targeted 5 times, only pulled in 3 receptions for 44 yards. So both receivers for Seattle really struggled in their last matchup against the Rams. And if we go back a little further and look at their first matchup, he was targeted more that game, 9 targets for 5 receptions there, 66 yards. Still, we would like to see a little bit more productivity, a little more upside out of those guys when we roster them this weekend. So there's a guy that I think can be real interesting, especially if Mike Evans happens to be out for this particular game. Not that I expect him to, but if he were to be out for this game, Chris Godwin, as you saw this past weekend, Buccaneers versus the Falcons, Godwin had a great game. Not only him, but Antonio Brown would be another guy who would see a huge uptick in volume and productivity. He had a monster game as well. Those would be some very interesting options for a second receiving option for the slate this weekend. So we already got Stefon Diggs in there. He's quite pricey. I don't know that you can afford to go with a Godwin and Diggs. That's just something you're going to have to keep in mind, though. Now, the guy that is interesting to me, because you're going to want to run it back, right? You got 2 Bills in Allen and Diggs. So who's a good run back option? Well, what about T.Y. Hilton? T.Y. Hilton, pretty affordable price over on DraftKings, $5,100, $6,200 on FanDuel. T.Y. Hilton is a guy that has really come on at the end of the season. The last quarter of the season, I would say, has been fantastic for T.Y. If we open up his recent game logs here, he's got performances of 13, 9, 11, but previous to that, 25, 28, 18. So typically we're looking for at least 3x when we roster a wide receiver. With quarterbacks, it's a little more, 3.5 to 4x their salary. That's 3.5 to 4 times their salary. With T.Y. Hilton, I would say that he's undoubtedly their number 1 receiver. If you look at the targets, 7, 7, 6, 7, 11. So, I mean, targeted pretty consistently. He would be a good piece to run it back with in a game stack with Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs. If you didn't want to go T.Y. Hilton, if you were looking to maybe save a few bucks and go down a little bit lower, I don't mind Zach Pascal. Zach Pascal typically slots in at the lines up at the slot receiver position, rather, which has been a very weak point, I would say, for this Buffalo Bills defense. So Pascal, if he lines up in the slot there, he could be the guy that overall really eats and could deliver on some big value on that $3,700 salary. That's a good way to save some money there. So this is starting to kind of give you an idea of roster construction. Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs, 2 higher price guys. We lock in Zach Pascal. We're going to need to look at some running backs here before we spend all of our money. So let's finish up with receiver and see if there's any other guys that we like. We've already mentioned Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin. Mike Evans, going to have to monitor his health, make sure that he's good to go. John Brown, another guy. If you wanted to go with a 3-man stack, I don't mind Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs, John Brown, a full Bills stack there. Give you an idea of what that would look like. John Brown, $4,700 over on DraftKings. His price over on FanDuel is $5,700. But he would be an interesting option. He's been out for the last few games. He did play the last game. He's a deep threat. Obviously, we know he's a home run hitter. The guy is a vertical speed type of guy. So it's a very real possibility that they find him deep and that he connects on a home run, on a long touchdown for the Bills. So he's another guy that I like to save a few bucks if you need to. Cheaper option. And trust me, you're going to need to, because we're going to want to lock in at least 2 of the higher priced running backs. So going down the list here, Michael Pittman Jr., he could be interesting. Josh Reynolds, another guy. If Cooper Kupp happens to miss this game, Josh Reynolds should be the next man up for the Rams. He's had some okay games, some pretty decent productive games. His price is very friendly $3,600. That's another guy that you can look to possibly save some salary this weekend. Van Jefferson would be another name to know, $3,100. So again, these are plays if Cooper Kupp is out. Van Jefferson, Josh Reynolds, those are some names that you can look at to save a few dollars at the wide receiver position. So if we head over to running back, I think we've pretty much hammered all the receivers that we need to know here. There we go. We've got it filtered so that we see just the running backs. My favorite running back on the board this weekend has to be Jonathan Taylor. You know, when you think of some of the best long runners, guys who are able to just break open and bust open a big long run, you think of guys like Derrick Henry, you think of guys like Dalvin Cook, you think of guys like Nick Chubb. Well, I think you should also consider Jonathan Taylor in that group of names. Jonathan Taylor has a lot of really long plays from scrimmage this year, not just on the run in the run game, but also in the receiving game. Taylor's been fantastic. If you missed last week's game, just smashed, went out of his mind. Let's look at Draftkings here and look at what Taylor did last game. 30 attempts, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns. Wasn't involved so much in the passing game. Got it all done on the ground for the most part. He hit that bonus, that 100-yard bonus that you get over on Draftkings, that 3-point bonus. That helped inflate this number, 41.4. I mean, just massive upside with Taylor. Looking back at some of his previous games here, 33.5, 22. I mean, the upside's there. And this guy's getting the majority of the carries, the majority of the touches for the Colts. It's been kind of a who's who in the backfield for the Colts ever since Marlon Mack went down earlier in the season. Jonathan Taylor started off strong. Then it kind of went over to Nyheim Hines. And then what's his name? What's his name? What's the other guy's name? The Colts running back. Wilkins. It escaped me. Wilkins, he popped for like a game. But for the most part, it's been the Justin Taylor, Nyheim Hines show. So my advice on Taylor, I would play him no matter what. But this game could turn into one of those situations where if the Bills start putting up points early, right, Taylor might kind of get game scripted out, but you have to decide for yourself on that one. I think no matter what, I'm going to probably put Taylor in my lineups. But if you do feel a different kind of way, I don't mind Nyheim Hines as a possible pass catching upside type of guy. He's not going to do a ton for you on the ground. If we look at Hines and his game log, doesn't get a whole lot of carries, right? 2 attempts, 8, 5, 7, where he typically makes his living is going to be through the air. Look at how many times he gets targeted here. 7, 4, 3, 4, 3, 10. Okay, so Nyheim Hines, more of the pass catching option in this backfield. So if you feel like the Colts let this game get away from them early and then they turn into a pass first team, then I think that benefits Nyheim Hines more than it does Taylor. But nonetheless, I think Taylor's just too good of an option to fade in this scenario. So I'm taking him, putting him in the lineup there. So now you've got an idea of kind of where we're going with this. We've got Josh Allen. We've got Stephon Diggs. We've got John Brown on the Buffalo side. And then we're running it back with Pascal, with Taylor. So we got a lot of the Indy and Buffalo game here, which, again, is probably going to be my favorite game to target out of all 3 of the games this weekend. But let's see what else we have at running back. We spent enough time on Taylor and speaking great praise and lavishing praise on him. Another guy I really like this weekend is going to be Cam Akers. He's $5,100. I think that's a little light on Cam Akers. I think he's underpriced based on the workload that he typically sees when he's healthy and in the lineup. So evidence of that. Not a very efficient game, but 21 carries, right? 34 yards. Only 1.6 yards per carry. So like I said, not a very efficient game. He did fumble. He did lose a fumble. But he was also targeted and caught 4 balls for 52 yards. So that's something to to not hang your hat on, but if it happens that he's, the lead pass catcher in this backfield, then, that's like icing on the cake, the cherry on top, right? But what you're paying for is these 20 plus carry outings. So 21, 29, 21, right? So that's the type of volume that we want to see from Cam Akers. And for $5,100, how do you pass this up? I don't know how you pass this up. Let's take a look and see how he did against Seattle. His previous outing only had 10 carries for 38 yards, but, that was a different time. He wasn't the guy yet for this Rams backfield. They were still trying to give Henderson and Brown, all the shine and all the work. But you could see from week 13 on, when Akers is healthy and he's in the lineup, he's getting the bulk of the work here. 21, 29, 15, 21. So I think that's more of a reliable source of information there, his last few games. So I really like Cam Akers. He's a guy that you can plug in there. And the lineup's starting to take shape. It's starting to take form, right? Josh Allen, Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, Stephon Diggs, Zach Pascal, John Brown. We've got a good core group of guys. I typically like to pay down at tight end and defense, so we can take a look at tight end next. Draftkings has already done that for us. Let's take a look over here at the study hub. We'll go ahead and filter out running back and go over to tight end. And right off the top, you see the top two names that pop up, Logan Thomas and Rob Gronkowski. Honestly, guys, these are going to be the two names, the two tight ends that I'm going to be looking at on DraftKings and FanDuel this weekend. Logan Thomas, he's always out there running routes, which is what we want from our tight ends, right? They don't score us any points when they're in line blocking for the quarterback. They don't score us any points when they're over on the sideline, not out on the field. So Logan Thomas, he doesn't have that problem. He's always out there. He's always running around. I would argue that he's probably the second best receiver on the Washington football team behind F1 Terry McLaurin. So Logan Thomas should see plenty of work here. It's not the easiest matchup. He's got the Tampa Bay Bucks, as we mentioned before. But the volume should be there for Logan Thomas. If we take a look real quick at his recent game logs, we can get an idea of how involved he actually is in this offense. And I mean, for a tight end, look at this, guys. You could almost put him at receiver, I would say. 6 targets, 12 targets, 16 targets, 7 targets, 9 targets, right? So the guy is getting fed. He's getting peppered with targets week in and week out, which is why he's $4,900. Now, that's not cheap. For a small slate like this, that's premium. That's top dollar. That's the top shelf stuff, right? If you don't want to pay the $4,900, I totally get it. If you want to save a little salary, you could go Rob Gronkowski. Gronkowski, definitely not the target monster that Logan Thomas is, but where Gronkowski does shine is those high value targets. And what I mean by high value is that he sees a lot of work in the red zone. 2 touchdowns here, right, against Detroit. 1 touchdown here against Minnesota. Not only that, but the guy hits some long plays too. 18 yards, 33 yards, 17 yards. So you're most likely not going to get a 100-yard bonus out of Rob Gronkowski, but what you're hoping for is that touchdown equity, that touchdown upside when you invest in a guy like Rob Gronkowski. And I think this is a good matchup for him. I think the price is right at $3,900. Other than Gronkowski, well, wait a second here. So they have him listed at $4,000, $3,900 on DK. Okay, so just a small little error. So he's not $4,000. You're actually getting a better deal on him. He's $3,900. So I like that price on Gronkowski nonetheless. If you look at the DVP here, as I mentioned, the matchup is a solid one. So going down the list here, Tyler Higbee, Dawson Knox, Gerald Everett, Jack Doyle, Jacob Hollister. I mean, these guys aren't guys that I feel completely comfortable about rostering. As I mentioned, Thomas and Gronk are going to be my favorite, names on this list. You're basically touchdown hunting with any of these other guys. The Colts, you just never know with their trio of tight ends if it's going to be a Jack Doyle game, if it's going to be a Mo Alley Cox game, if it's going to be a Trey Burton game. Hard to predict, hard to project those guys. And that's true with the rest of the Colts receivers behind, like a T.Y. Hilton. I mean, Michael Pittman can go off. Zach Pascal can go off. You just never know. So Colts are hard to figure out as far as their passing game goes. Same thing with Seattle. They have a couple of guys in Hollister and Disley that any given week, I mean, one of those guys, sure, they can, haul in a touchdown. So if you're looking to pay way down, you got to hope that a guy like Disley or Hollister or even Cameron Brate can haul in a touchdown for you. If you're looking for somebody with a little bit of a higher floor, Logan Thomas is probably going to give you the highest floor out of anyone here. Gronk, again, touchdown upside all day long. So that's enough on tight ends. Let's take a look at defense and see who we like over on Draftkings and FanDuel on defense. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're the highest priced defense, and for good reason. $3,400. They've been a very good defense all season long. When I try to pick defenses for fantasy football, for daily fantasy football, I look at a couple of things. I look at their offense. I want a defense that has a good offense. And the reason for that is you hope that offense is going to put up big points and put pressure on the other team to keep up that pace, right? Because the more times that a opposing quarterback drops back and throws the ball, the more times that your defense has an opportunity to score you fantasy points. So we want defenses against quarterbacks that are dropping back as much as possible. And I think the Buccaneers, they fit the description that I'm laying out for you. I think that if Tom Brady and these guys can get out to a pretty big lead, then Alex Smith is going to be a sitting duck. He's going to have to drop back a lot. He's going to have to throw it around. And I think the Bucs will put a lot of pressure on Alex Smith. I think there's opportunity for some interceptions, for some sacks. So I like the way that game script kind of plays out for the Bucs defense. If you didn't want to go with the Bucs, I could see something similar happening here with the Buffalo Bills at $3,500. They're even more expensive than the Bucs. Same situation. If Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, John Brown start to go off, right? Well, then Phillip Rivers is going to have to pass the ball. He's going to be dropping back a lot. That means more interceptions, more sacks, more opportunities for turnovers and fantasy points for your team. Other options here on the board, the Seahawks and Rams. Not a big fan of either one of those defenses. It would be hard for me to take the Rams in this situation just because they're facing off against guys like Russell Wilson, like DK Metcalf, like Tyler Lockett, like Chris Carson. They're just too talented. They're too talented for me to bet against them. Russell Wilson has the kind of talent and upside that, on any game, he could break a slate, right? So do I want to take a defense against him, betting against Russell Wilson, betting against his receivers and that running back? It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite option. On the other side of that one, the Seahawks defense hasn't been very good this season. They are potentially facing off against a quarterback with very little NFL experience, so there could be an edge there. Same scenario, if Russ and his offense comes out clicking, then the Rams are going to have to throw the ball, and it'll be more passes and less runs for Cam Akers and potentially more turnovers for the Seahawks. So something to think about. And finally, we've got the Washington football team and the Indianapolis Colts. They're down at the bottom of the list here, 2,300 and 2,400. 3,900 and 3,700 on FanDuel. But the Colts, they're going against Josh Allen and Diggs, right? We like Josh Allen, we like Diggs, we like Brown, so that's probably a fade for me on the Colts. Washington football team, they've got some interesting upside. They've definitely got the defensive line to cause problems for Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. So if you feel like that defensive front four can disrupt Brady and create some pressure and hopefully force some turnovers, then I don't mind paying all the way down $2,400 on DraftKings, $3,700 on FanDuel for the Washington football team defense. So this is probably going to be a week where I don't go with 3 running backs. Typically, I'm a 3 running back guy over on DraftKings. I typically lock in, 3 guys that are going to get a ton of volume at running back. I just don't love any of the other options. Gibson against the Bucks, not my favorite. Carson, pretty underwhelming. He's been nursing a foot injury for much of the season. Not somewhere I really want to go against this Rams defense. Ronald Jones, he's had some great games this year, but going against Washington, you can see, not the greatest matchup for him. McKissick could be interesting. Probably a pretty high floor for McKissick as far as his involvement in the passing game. If you feel like the Buccaneers do get up pretty big early on in this game, then I expect more McKissick and less Gibson. McKissick can haul in a ton of passes for you. But, going down the list here, I'm not really interested in playing any of the Bills running backs, Moss or Singletary. I think the cutoff for me would probably be Nyheim Hines. So like Carson, Gibson, Jones, McKissick, Hines. I'd probably draw the line there. Zach Moss, maybe he falls into the end zone. Devin Singletary, not really interesting to me. Has done little to nothing. 9 fantasy points per game this season. Not gonna give you tremendous upside. So yeah, I'd probably draw the line right underneath Nyheim Hines. That's who I feel comfortable with. Hines, McKissick, and up from there. So I'd probably go. I'd probably end up going with another receiver. Maybe you even get real weird and decide to put in another tight end. You can run 2 tight ends over on DK. You could put a Logan Thomas and Gronk if you wanted to get fancy and kind of mix things up. But I would probably go 3 wide receivers this week and plug in. Maybe a salary saving guy here, pay up at tight end, and then, you can take pretty much whatever defense you want at that point. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope that I covered everything that you wanted to know. I hope that this was informative and brought you value. I will be doing another one of these videos in the near future for the Sunday slate of games. So definitely be on the lookout for that video with Rise or Fall. And if you've never been to Rise or Fall before, teamriseorfall.com. This is where it all goes down, people. A lot of great things going down at the Team Rise or Fall website. Articles, cheat sheets. You saw the NFL Study Hub. They've got more. There's just too much to talk about, but definitely check it out. They got a free Discord chat. Discord, a lot of great information, a lot of great DFS talk going down in their Discord channel. Definitely sign up for that. Totally free. And then their Twitter at Team Rise or Fall. But that's going to do it for today. I'm CJ Curry. We will see you on the next video. You guys be good and win a few bucks. See ya.